All right, we got the black pieces. E4. All right. What shall we do? Start with c5. There are a bunch of Sicilians that we haven't really got the chance to play because the way that our opponent plays doesn't exactly allow it. So what Sicilian should we go for? So many options. Dragon, Najdorf, Khan, Taimanov. There's a very popular move, g6. I'm also thinking about d6 and how simple it is to explain, but definitely I would say the move knight c6, g6 all allow for transpositions. I'm gonna start with knight c6. It's actually very flexible. After this move, and by the way, in the Sicilian you always take. After this, we can knight takes. We can play almost all the Sicilians from here. A good number of them, that's for sure. There's e5, there's e6, there's g6. Maybe not the best, but yeah, you can still play d6. a6, probably not the best move, but I imagine it's still playable somehow. And knight f6 as well. So there's really so many that can be played. I'm gonna choose g6. It's a popular one for sure. I think once the bishop reaches g7, there are a lot of opening traps that white can fall for if they're not too familiar with the position. And if they are familiar, then we'll get a normal game out of it. So yeah, bishop fianchettos, and of course, knight takes knight can always happen, and we'll be ready to take back, not with the d pawn, but with the b pawn. We don't really want to allow queen takes queen, you know? We don't need to allow that stuff. Okay, bishop e3. Opponent is playing well so far. So d6, knight f6, castle. This is like the dragon in all its glory. Knight f6 makes an attempt to accelerate the dragon, which is a terminology you may have heard of before. So knight f6 and like takes, e5, knight d5, I think is the stuff. But I do think that d6 and just playing the normal stuff is good enough for now. So I'm gonna play d6. It makes more sense usually to look at the main line of an opening, just the most basic way to play, before you check out any of the kind of sidelines, let's call them. Knight f6. Again, we're always ready to take b takes c6 here. So, surprisingly, after castling, the first thing I'm at least going to consider in this position is going to be knight g4. Just as a rule, when you play knight f6, you're not always threatening it like directly, but it's very good to just double check whether knight g4 is good, because if you can ever win this dark squared bishop that white has, you absolutely want to. So no matter what, I'm going to calculate it. So if we go knight g4 and the bishop moves, the first thing to understand is we just win on the spot. We win a piece. So knight g4 actually forces knight takes knight. Our queen is being hit, so we don't have time to take the bishop. So pawn takes back. And then in that position, you know, the bishop could move, let's say, to one of those squares. But specifically, I'd be looking at d4. Bishop d4. Offering to trade bishops here, which is not the best for us. And after bishop d4, if I play e5 to win the bishop, right? Then where's the bishop going to go from there? Bishop c5, looking to take advantage of this pin. I'm already looking at how strong bishop h6 would be, pinning the queen to the king. So knight g4, knight takes, bishop d4. I think e5 is already good for me, because if the bishop goes back, I'll just take on e3. And even though this e7 pawn is tough to defend, I gotta say I'm convinced by that. Just taking this bishop should be enough. So I'm used to f3 being played. It was not played, so that's why I'm immediately going crazy calculating knight g4. Because if I can get my hands on this bishop, I know I'll be better. For sure. So I'm already a pretty big fan of this move. Knight takes, bishop g5 can be played, but in all these lines, I feel pretty comfortable. So I think I'm gonna go for it. Castling would be normal, but again, I'm used to f3. So I didn't see f3, and now I'm like, wait a minute. What's going on with knight g4? So I've got questions, they need answers. Let's find out. But in general, as I mentioned, if you play knight f6 in this opening and your opponent doesn't stop you from playing knight g4, there's a very good chance it'll be a good move. Okay, so we're continuing on the line we calculated. We'll take the knight back. And if white just makes a normal move, like, I don't know, f3 or bishop c4, basically by taking this bishop, I think I'm already much better. Like, it's that good to win that bishop for your knight. I'm saying win it. I mean, it's truly an exchange, but I value that bishop way higher than I value my knight, so I think it's absolutely worth it. So much so that it's not even like I'm exchanging pieces. Like, I'm winning the bishop. That's how it feels. And after bishop here, if I just traded, that wouldn't be as convincing. All of a sudden, I've lost my best piece. You know, I don't really want to trade bishops like that. My bishop on g7 is quite valuable. There might be situations where I need to trade it. We'll get to those, but for the most part, we should be okay. As long as we have that bishop on the board. So even though this is a move in the center, and I think you could make an argument that it makes the most sense, like it's a central bishop move, you also have to remember something, which is that these pieces are lined up and the main idea is to play bishop h6. So it's very normal and likely that my opponent is going to keep the bishop on that diagonal. So I was definitely expecting the bishop to stay on the diagonal. So we see bishop f4. The reason I don't really mind bishop f4 is because I see a few maybe nice things. First of all, there's no f4. Right? If f4 happens, then my knight gets kicked out of e5 and stuff. But now I can put a knight here and I'm pretty safe for at least a couple moves. So I like that there's no f4, e5 coming at me. Also, I would not ever really think about playing e5 here unless I was like mean, in the other case, the bishop goes here, I play e5, and I win the bishop, which I'm kind of happy about. Here, it's not fully a guarantee. Like, basically, it would be bishop g5, f6. Because if I don't play f6, what happens after bishop g5, right? It's like I move my queen. No, that's not right. So f6, and then the bishop goes back. And yes, I win it, but I've played like f6 and e5. Suddenly, my bishop I'm so proud of, it actually doesn't impress me that much anymore. So while this is okay, I don't think it's good enough. I don't think it's good enough. Focus on having this bishop. Look at all the good things we can do over here. Rook b8, queen b6, queen a5. I see some good potential. I see some very nice potential. Queen b6 also hits this pawn. There's something to consider though, which is queen b6 hits the pawn, but after f3, if I go in with knight f2 to fork, I have to put up with bishop to e3, which is a little annoying. So I need to calculate things out. For example, queen b6, f3, rook b8, making a more important threat. Knight a4 is nonsense. I mean, maybe not nonsense, but definitely not good. That looks pretty good. Big time threats there. I mean, at b3, I'm looking at this diagonal and thinking, there's got to be stuff wrong with this. There has to be. So I'm liking queen b6 a lot. And the other nice thing about queen b6 is, even in the absolute worst case, I can always bring my knight back to e5. Completely fine. So this makes a threat. And again, if I get attacked and for some reason I can't go there, I can always play knight e5. Rook b8's a great move next as well. And one thing that's kind of annoying is the bishop getting there, but I'm hoping that that can't happen. Bishop e6 is fantastic square to develop my bishop to next. Notice how the knight's not on d4 anymore. It's already captured. So bishop e6, knight e5, rook b8. And you just see like every single piece working against that white king. It starts to look very scary. Okay, knight a4, and the reason why we didn't, or we weren't concerned about this move is because queen takes f2 is possible, right? And queen takes f2, it won't be our fancy attack, but that's all we need to do. And of course, if the queens exchange here, then our knight comes in and forks the remaining rooks, so that would be even worse. Queen takes f2. Tough move to handle. You don't want to trade. I have another threat here, which I'll let you in on the secret. Queen takes f4 and bishop h6. I know it doesn't win material, but what it does do is simplify. It takes these two pieces for white and these two pieces for black off the board. Because I just won a pawn, that would be a very, very nice achievement for me. So after a move like bishop e2, let's say, of course I can play knight e5. Great move, like very, very nice. But I can also play queen takes and bishop h6 if I want to simplify the position. When you have an extra pawn and your opponent still has the queen on the board, usually that will provide some form of compensation or counterplay. But if you trade the queens off, then your one pawn advantage will more often than not improve. So h3, I can definitely play this queen f4 thing, but it doesn't seem necessary because I have a queen exchange right in front of me. We can take this. The rook has to take back to stop knight f2, which it will. But then our knight goes to e5. And quite honestly, it's the best square on the board. Like, so strong. Knight e5, no pawns can kick me out, and my bishop's supporting it. So we trade the queens. We bring our knight to e5. This position is overwhelming. There's no bishop c4, so my bishop's also going to get to the great e6 square. And look at the trajectory of that knight. Back to c3, well, it's not going anywhere. a4, it's not going anywhere. So we're going to follow this up with moves like bishop e6, moves like rook b8, maybe castling. Nobody can bother this knight. It's really, really nice. And of course, bishop takes gives us the two bishops and so much control of the dark squares. That's what the Dragon Sicilian is all about. It's about this bishop. Even though our knight has been the one doing the heavy lifting and the queen, it's actually been the presence of this bishop that has enabled all these threats to work. The threat of bishop h6 a lot, the threat of taking on b2, right? Guarding the knight here. It's been all about this bishop the whole game. It's the best piece on the board, and we still have it. And even a move like bishop h2 would immediately drop the tactic bishop h6. Okay, bishop e2, a good move. Good move. Rook b8 looks like a great place to start. So it's going to be one of these two moves. Both look tremendously good. I'll start with bishop e6, gets a piece out. The other reason I like starting with this is, I don't know, in case this trades and the bishop wanted to come to c4, just covering that square an extra amount. If b3 and the knight wants to reroute this way, which wouldn't be a bad idea, then it's nice to have the a-pawn. So it's not clear to me yet if I want to play this or if I want to play castle, other rook to b8 and a5. So that's why I'm not going to rush this, and I'm going to make the move that I'm going to need no matter what, which is castling. Yes, knight c4 is available, and it probably will win the bishop pair, but I think castling is just an important move to get in, and rook b8, rook b4 is my next idea. The reason I'm keeping a rook on a8 is because I'm expecting that after something like this, b3 might happen, and if that knight moves ever, a5, a4 is going to be very, very strong. So once again, knight c4 is possible, but I believe that rook b8 is just much stronger. This attack is non-existent at best. Rook b4 with an immediate double attack, and when the knight goes back to c3, there are immediate threats, like knight c4, for example, that are probably winning. These bishops, I mean, just look at the position. Barreling down on b2, just slowly bringing every piece into the attack. I'm not trying to play knight c4 or like c5. I'm not trying to do anything until everybody's ready. But things are starting to add up here. A5, rook b4, rook b8, and then we're really ready for moves like knight c4. It's like all these moves look good, but they don't look completely winning, or they don't look like I should drop what I'm doing to play them. If my opponent blunders and plays like bishop d1, well, yeah, then I'm going to play knight c4. It's winning on the spot. But for the moment, I don't see that happening. I don't see any big blunders by white. Notice how at the start of the game we spent more time, and now we're playing very quickly because we know exactly where the pieces go. Of course, bishop e6, of course, castle, and then rook over to b8. I could have played this rook, but again, I like the idea of supporting this a pawn. g5. Now, my opponent, I'm guessing, wanted to play h4, h5, but saw the pawn was hanging. So played g5 and now wants h4, h5. And why am I not scared of this at all? Well, because even if you take and I open up the h file, even if you somehow get your rook there, there's still no threat. You could bring your rook to h7, there's no threat. There's going to be no threats for the rest of the game. Which is why I'm, again, like I said, not in any rush. Okay, rook b4. This was the move we were preparing. Hitting a4 and hitting e4. Knight c3 is the only move that truly deals with both of those things. This move allows us to not only make these threats, but also double up next. If b3, believe me, I'm thinking about rook takes a4 and rook b8. King a1 would lose to threats along the long diagonal. But king c1, I'm still calculating. Because king c1, bishop takes a2, threatens rook b1. And it's like, it's close to decisive. Maybe not quite there. See what he does. Yeah, like I said, knight c3 is the move to defend both of these. But it's possible that b3 gets played. And then, am I taking this pawn, or am I, like, trying to play rook takes a4? So the one thing about b3 is that if I play rook b8, yes, I have a huge threat here, game-winning idea. But then the knight retreats to b2, and it's actually a very solid position. It'll be very good for me, but it's also very solid for him. I can take on e4. But truly, if I want to play this idea, it's probably got to happen now or immediately after this capture. So is there anything there for me? That's the only check we would do here, otherwise take the pawn. Rook takes a4, takes, rook b8, king c1 forced. Bishop takes a2, threatening mate. Now, we're also threatening to win the rook. So the only move that I can see there for white is rook d1. And then after check, the king would escape. And if knight f3 to cover the escape square, bishop takes f3, then I think in that position we win because of bishop c3, an unstoppable mate. Knight f3, I'm threatening mate in 1. You can move the pawn. It's not like a guarantee. You can kind of play like c3 in that position. And even though it looks very tempting, I don't know if I buy that it's winning. I think it's not good enough. Looks flashy, but ultimately not good enough. So definitely, you know, whether or not that works, this will be a great place to start. So let's take this no matter what. Because, yeah, I don't know, if the bishop goes back, then maybe we could still play this line. But the point is, we'll take here. I'm really interested in that move. Like, it's very tempting. But this is why we played rook b4, so obviously makes sense to continue. If the bishop moves somewhere, then again I'm looking at this, but I'm not sure what's changed from this position to the next, you know? Bishop takes a2, rook d1, and we kind of have the same problem. The nice thing in that position is that I think we could play knight f3, knight takes g5, and just continue the game from there. Down the exchange, but completely crushing. The reason this move is very tempting, and why I may play it if the bishop retreats, is just that the dragon is a type of opening where you can often sack the exchange somewhere, and the resulting position, you don't need to win the exchange back. You just need to keep playing that position. Like, the resulting position, you'll be down material, but probably be better. So many active pieces, you don't need to worry about, oh, how am I going to win the exchange back? It's like, no, I'm not even sure you want to. Pieces are just so much better than the rooks. But no matter what, this is a great way to start by taking this center pawn. So we're happy with this move. If the bishop wants to give itself up on e5, this guy's going to become a monster. Already is, but even more. I guess this is the only other move to consider. Because, yeah, you're either going to take the knight, save your bishop, or defend it. There's only so many options. Now, even though I would say that this move is clearly bad, I actually think it might be one of the better moves there. My opponent's position looked like it was going to be really dire after moving the bishop back, so surprisingly, I almost agree with this decision. What to take with? Obviously, bishop makes more sense. Rook takes makes an immediate threat. Rook takes h4. And yeah, the reason I was calculating this rook takes a4 is because as soon as I go here to make this threat, white plays knight b2, and suddenly it takes me a really long time to break through. Like a5, a4 takes, like I still don't have a threat there. So I find that position annoying, that's all. So this looked like a direct breakthrough, but now he's taken. So now these threats don't really work as well. But still, do we take here or here? We would never take with the pawn here. That's for sure. Knight c5, and maybe I'm not even that much better anymore. Rook takes h4, I would say almost forced. That looks quite good. The only reason I'm hesitant about this is some bishop f3 stuff. Maybe not right away, but in general. Okay, guess I am gonna make the decision to go here. Very tough choice for me, honestly. The reason I decided on this is because I think h4 to defend the pawn. I'm going to reply h6. And white needs to play rook g1. Because if takes, I actually win a piece here, which is a weird thing. And then if the rook's tied down to the defense of that pawn, I think I'm quite happy there, and I'll continue rook b8, rook b4. So knight c3 has been played. There's a discovered attack, but there's not really anything this rook can do. If I take here, the knight takes, so I am actually just going to go take this pawn. My opponent could miss that the knight's hanging, but I want to take this free pawn anyway. Knight e4 would not be a bad move at all. But again, after rook e5, I don't see where the knight's going next. There's just no good squares for that piece. It's a sad piece. King b2 is also the last move on earth you'd want to play. Never want to walk into those pins because you'll never get out of them. White will be in this pin until he loses that knight, basically. So next plans, I'm assuming this knight moves. We just save our rook with tempo. Knight moves again, and then probably a5, a4, because now we have some checkmate ideas in the corner there. Okay, so as expected, my opponent does miss that this knight is hanging, and of course it's relevant because we can take it and hit the rook. So if rook d3 to attack our bishop, then we have rook c5, which is the only reason, maybe not the only reason. I suppose we have rook e5 as well, but I'll definitely go rook c5. But if we weren't able to make a threat with this rook, then this rook d3 could maybe work for white, but obviously when my opponent's position is getting worse and worse, tactics are less likely to work for them. Rook d3, we'll go rook c5, and now we've covered the bishop, and a5, a4 should be more or less a winning idea. I think my opponent will get interested in h5 takes, yeah, but I'm doing the same thing, and if you take, I'll take with the h-pawn. Rook h3, first of all, is impossible. But even after you play there, it's like, I don't even have to take your rook. This bishop also covers h8. So there's no danger to my king. Whereas for white's king, I think there's real danger. Okay, we take back. And I prefer this way, because if I take this way, I don't like my bishop being undefended. Doesn't seem necessary. Here we go. H takes g6, and again, like I've been saying, a4 and takes is going to be a little bit more effective than his h5 and takes. We both have the exact same idea, but I'm up a piece and I've got the bishop to control. Imagine that was a light squared bishop, right? Obviously the game would end immediately, but the point is the threats are created from who controls this diagonal. We have a very similar structure. Okay, a4, good move. Absolutely. Now our rook has no purpose on the a file, so we're definitely going to slot it over to the b file. My opponent's in a tough position because that move isn't possible, which I know they want to play. And this bishop's defended. There's just no threats to really keep white's position going here. Okay, obviously this needs some consideration, but I wouldn't spend too much time on it. Just the cursory check. Takes, takes, takes. King c2 seems like it's not enough to win because all these pieces are on light squares, so I might have a discover check with this bishop, but I can never attack it. They're all on light squares, and that's a dark square bishop, so... And this rook's defended, so I won't have any checks like that either. So I don't think I'm gonna spend too much time looking at that. So I think bishop f5, hitting the rook, threatens rook b3 if the rook moves. I think that's more aligned with how we want to play. Hitting the rook, and it needs to move, let's say e3 or d1, but then rook b3 will be possible due to the pin. Yeah, very, very tough position. He played a complete game, though. He lost a piece sort of near the end, but I would say he went down pretty slowly. Like, it was a good fight. The dragon is really tough to handle, though. I mean, I think it's the Sicilian that a lot of players start out with, because understandably, it's just really aggressive. Your bishop's so strong on g7. It's a very fun opening to play, in my opinion. So, I decided to go for g6, and if my opponent had played c4, it would have been sort of the Maroczy bind setup, which is actually really tough to handle, but usually it takes a stronger player to play that. Okay, so yeah, this was exactly the moment where I said, look, I'm familiar with the theory a little bit here. When knight f6 is played, knight g4 is a very strong move. So when my opponent played long castle, the bells and whistles were going off saying, wait a minute. f3 usually gets played to stop knight g4. So if knight g4 is the move that prevents, then by not playing it, I should probably play knight g4, right? Knight takes c6, of course we take back, and now I was mentioning bishop d4, but after bishop d4, there's a few reasons why things are no good. I was wondering whether to throw in e5 here, because then we get the bishop outright, but this would be the exact same idea, and it's been this bishop h6 move that's been so nasty to handle. Bishop here, f4, and then e5 would actually just be a knockout. So, of course, though, white's going to keep the bishop on the exact same diagonal. The queen and bishop always want to line up here as white in this line to play bishop h6. But queen b6, I mean, this is a little harsh, right? Queen b6 is the best move, and it's inaccurate. It's the best move, and it's inaccurate. I mean, it's tough. Chess.com, it's real tough, you know? Even when you play the best move, it's not the best move. Anyways, queen b6. I recommend playing this inaccurate move, as it hits the pawn on f2 and prepares rook b8. Knight a4. Unfortunately, not the best move, missing this threat. But even if you had taken that threat into account, as I was mentioning, the move f3, this was the line we calculated. Rook b8, pretty strong move. Now the pawn kind of has to go to b3, and there's so many weaknesses here that black can play moves like queen a5, queen c5, and have some threats. Why is knight f2 not a move, and why I haven't been playing it? It's because of bishop e3. So it's actually a really big blunder, knight f2. White has a tricky move, which is why f3 was played, which is why we were calculating it. Our opponent played knight a4, and at this point, and by the way, this looks very suspect. Knight f6 being best, I disagree with, like, on a personal level. Once again, knight e5 is the best move, of course. Like, clearly the best move. But, of course, it's excellent, but knight f6 is best. There's no way in hell you don't put the knight on an unassailable square, an outpost, I mean, this is a ridiculously good square. So anyway, our pieces, this is exactly where we need them. Rook on b8, a5, rook b4, right? And at this point, rook takes e4. You'll notice not far behind is rook takes a4. Like, it is a very reasonable move here. It's just so strong. But a free center pawn, you can't say no. However, if the bishop had retreated to like g3, then what was I about to do? Rook takes a4. And let's see if the line that the engine has is the line that we calculated. Rook a4 takes, rook b8 check. King has to go to c1. Bishop b5 is silly, of course. Now bishop takes a2, threatens rook b1. And yeah, the best move here is rook d to d1. Because even if you guard mate and play c3, I'll check you and I'll win your rook. So you actually have to make a move that gives you an escape square and guards the rook. So rook d1, and then, yeah, this is what we were looking at. Knight f3. If the bishop takes, then we immediately have mate with bishop c3. So knight f3, covering the escape square. And now white would play something like c3. But the difference from this line and the last time we calculated it is the bishop was on f4. So g5 wasn't hanging. So now we would just drop back, take on g5, and black is all over the place here. There's knight e4 coming in. There's bishop c3. There's bishop b3. There's rook b1. Like, this is just a massacre. The pieces are so goddamn strong. So strong here. It's over. It's like -6. Like, this is a really, really nasty position. And you will often get these in the dragon. These positions where you sack the exchange and completely crushing. So it's actually a shame we didn't get that, because it would have been a really thematic idea. Rook takes a4. The other thematic dragon sacrifice, I'll just go back for a second. Not all the time do you see these knights exchange like that by b takes c6. So sometimes they'll trade like this. Rook takes c3 is the other really common exchange. So just good to know that sacking the exchange is a very common occurrence in the dragon overall. So that's why I would never hesitate to do it there. Okay, and here, yeah, we take, we win a piece. This was just cleanup. Rook e5, I'm actually not sure I agree with that. That seems a little bit harsh. Rook c5 looks like, I mean, holding on to the dark square bishop here looks much nastier for my opponent in the long run. Feels like they're going to get mated. So once again, what's the best move here? I would say rook c5. It's a very close debate, but look at the disrespect to my move. Rook e5, rook c5. Pretty much the exact same moves, and I would even wager the longer you let the engine sit, the more it likes rook c5. Rook c5, good. Just good. How is playing the second best move good? Like, sure, I could maybe say that rook e5 should be the best move. Maybe. I don't even agree with that, but let's say this is best. Isn't rook c5 then excellent at the very minimum? Like, isn't it excellent then? What the hell is good? It's just a blatant disrespect to rook c5. Actually crazy. Okay, a5, a4, rook b8. And now bishop f5 is, I think, the simplest. And the position becomes tough to play. Just, I'm getting absolutely brutalized by the engine in this game. I would also like a recount on this game. Complete disrespect to my moves here. This should be a 99 accuracy game. Like, this is actually egregious. Calling queen b6 inaccurate here is a joke upon jokes. That is unbelievable. It's just incredible. Minus 0.86. Queen b6. Huh? Guys, you gotta trust me. Can't trust this engine. You gotta trust your boy, all right? Class is in session. You gotta put some trust in your teacher. These awful evaluations will lead you astray. I hope you enjoyed the dragon. It was a lot of fun for me to play this game. There are so many tactics in this opening. Hanging on to this bishop is the most important thing. You'll notice I had that bishop all the way until the final position. Winning your opponent's dark squared bishop for your knight, like exchanging, is so strong if you can do it. So if you play knight f6 and there's no f3, hit it with knight g4. It'll almost always be a very, very strong move. f3 would be the main theory, and then you get positions that are very standard for the dragon, where you castle, they castle, and you know, there might be things like rook b8, bishop d7, knight takes d4. And, you know, the idea is to sort of get the pawns going, rook c8, and there are some sacrifices down the line. So it's a fun game. White's going to attack you, but you're going to attack the white king as well. It's very double-edged, so it's kind of a fun line to play. I would say at the higher levels, it's probably not the best, but there's a long way to go till then. A lot of players started out learning the dragon as their first Sicilian because it's very aggressive, very rewarding, attacking chess, and it's fun. Like, it is a fun position to play.